Who are the Timekeepers? What is the TVA hiding? And when the hell is Mobius going to ride a jet ski? All of these questions answered and more in today's video. Hey YouTubers, what's up? I'm someone who reads a little bit too much into subtle details back here, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I make Marvel videos every 2 weeks. I make Marvel theories about the MCU and what I think is going to happen in the new movies or up and coming or current, and today we're going to be taking a closer look at the Disney Plus original series, Loki. Really quick, I want to go ahead and give a little disclaimer. In this video, I will be covering and examining the first 3 episodes of Loki, so if you haven't seen it, please watch that before you watch this. I don't want to spoil the series to anyone who hasn't seen it yet. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump right into the video. The first thing I want to address is this bombshell dropped at the end of episode 3.
I was told that everyone who works at the TVA was created by the Timekeepers.
That's ridiculous. They're all variants, just like us.
Now, we know that Sylvie isn't lying to Loki whenever she says this because of the agent whose mind she went into. After Sylvie releases the control of the agent, all that agent can do is sit there in utter disbelief of what she just witnessed, rocking back and forth, muttering the words, "It's real, it's real, it's real." I believe whenever she's saying that, she's referring to the memories that had been wiped from her mind. So obviously this is a huge reveal, because if you've been watching the show, then you know that the Timekeepers are the one who created the TVA, or at least that's what we've been told up until this point. The theme of suppression and propaganda is so prevalent in this show, especially in this scene.
Because the TVA is my life. And it's real because I believe it's real.
It shows how the TVA acts as almost like a governing body like Nazi Germany, if you think of it that way, with their propaganda telling these people they have a greater purpose. They were created for a greater purpose. Yet, the truth of it is that they are all variants, like the very thing they're trying to destroy every single day. Because that's what they've been told. After this reveal, I was wondering what else the Timekeepers or the TVA would be hiding from us. And when taking a look at the comics, it turns out the Timekeepers are hiding a lot. So in the comics, the Timekeepers don't necessarily protect the flow of time. What they do is they protect the reality or the timeline they exist in. In fact, the TVA was created before the Timekeepers. Yes, you heard me right. The TVA was created before the Timekeepers. The Timekeepers were created by a being known as the One Who Remains, who was the last official director of the TVA before his reality got engulfed by the heat death of the universe. However, there is a catch. The One Who Remains did create the Timekeepers, but in attempting to create them, there was a failed experiment. And those beings are known as the Time Twisters, which is a really, really stupid name. But here we are anyways. So the goals of the Time Twisters are essentially the same as the Timekeepers. You know, they're trying to keep the reality in which they exist alive. They're trying to keep that timeline prevalent. The only difference between them is that the Time Twisters destroy realities while the Timekeepers preserve them. But the significance of the Time Twisters in this video is that they have impersonated the Timekeepers on numerous occasions in the comics. Now, the question I have is, what if the Timekeepers presented in Loki are secretly the Time Twisters in disguise? This would make sense given the fact the Timekeepers are so elusive in Loki. They're these omnipotent beings that are never really seen. And this would make sense because in the comics, the Time Twisters essentially manipulate everyone and everything to keep themselves in existence. And what is the only thing we've seen the TVA do in Loki? Prune timelines that go against the, quote, sacred timeline. Another point I'd like to make is that the TVA is actually made up of genetic copies of one being in the comics. It's just faceless consultants who go about their day basically doing the bidding of whoever the director is. So assuming that in the comics, since the Timekeepers are running the TVA, they would have the knowledge to recreate these faceless beings. Going under that assumption, it would make sense to assume that these Time Twisters don't share the same knowledge as they are not the directors of the TVA. Therefore, it would make sense why they would have to bring variants and recondition them into doing their bidding. like we see in Loki. So let's assume this is happening in Loki. Like I said before, it makes sense why we haven't seen the Timekeepers, why they're so elusive. They're this presence that we don't understand, yet they're always alluded to all the time. So assuming this is actually how things are working in Loki, everyone is acting as if nothing is wrong. Judge Renslayer, who apparently has direct contact with the Timekeepers, is just going about her day, going about her business. So therefore, it would be safe to assume that anyone who does the Timekeepers' bidding wouldn't exactly know that they're not the Timekeepers. You know, they would be able to manipulate anyone the Timekeepers recruited. You know, someone like Immortus, for example. If you're unfamiliar with Immortus, and you were in the exact same boat I was 2 days ago, upon researching this topic, I found this really interesting character and uncovered something really, really big. Now, I'm sure you've heard a lot of other theories from other people talking about Kang the Conqueror and where he takes place in Loki, what he has to do with it. Is he one of the Timekeepers? I believe that, yes, Kang is a part of Loki, and I think he does play a significant role, but I don't think he's doing it as Kang. I think he's doing it as Immortus. And here's why. Let's start at the beginning. Nathaniel Richards is born in the 30th century and subsequently finds a time machine in his adulthood. Bored of the peace and utopia his century has to offer, which everyone wants, but okay, he goes back in time to ancient Egypt and proclaims himself as Pharaoh Ramatut. He attempts to rule over the Egyptians until he is outed by the Fantastic Four. After this, he attempts to return back to his reality. This wouldn't really work out, so instead, he finds himself lost in the time stream and reinvents himself a second time as the Scarlet Centurion. Now, he gets this from his ancestor, Victor Von Doom. He bases his costume off of Doom's costume and kind of his whole personality around it. Then he gets defeated by the Avengers, and after that, he decides to, for a third time, reinvent himself and change his name to Kang the Conqueror. Now, as Kang the Conqueror, he's finally found a name that sticks, and for decades he goes to multiple different realities attempting to, well, conquer them. He falls in love with a woman named Ravonna Renslayer, who should sound familiar because she is in Loki as Judge Renslayer. He has a child named Marcus, and unfortunately the two end up dying. Not too long after their death, Kang became obsessed with the idea of immortality and attempted to become immortal. He began studying a realm called Limbo, a reality where you are between life and death, making you essentially immortal. During his studies, the Timekeepers approached him with an offer. They offered him immortality in exchange for Kang to preserve timelines rather than conquer them. And with no hesitation, like a college student going through their last semester, Kang once again reinvented himself and became Immortus, ruler of the realm of Limbo and preserver of time. With a newfound purpose, Immortus held up his end of the bargain and served the Timekeepers well. However, there was a little bit of Kang left in him. As Immortus began preserving timelines, he started remembering just how much he hates the Avengers, due to the fact that they were always there to stop him from conquering places, because, you know, the Avengers tend to not like that. So Immortus concocts a plan to use, drumroll please, the Scarlet Witch, in order to revive the dead, to create an army to kill the Avengers. Yes, you heard me correctly. Immortus uses Wanda Maximoff as a pawn against the Avengers. In the comics, Immortus uses a slew of manipulation tactics to try and break Wanda's psyche. He does this until she's fully broken, making her susceptible to his charm and spell and hallucinations. One of the ways he attempted to break Wanda's psyche was to steal her children's souls. Let's take a brief step back and look at another Disney Plus show that released recently. Wandavision. In the show, not only did Agatha make her debut, she was obsessed with trying to find out how Wanda brought Vision back from the dead. Not only that, Wanda's children were introduced in the show, officially, and then subsequently taken away, leaving us with this end credit scene where Wanda's trying to figure out how to get her kids back. So I believe that Agatha was enlisted by Immortus to corrupt Wanda into getting her to revive the dead for Immortus to concoct his evil plan just like in the comics. I believe Agatha is doing this because Immortus offered her salvation, essentially. She does this in exchange for her life at her Salem witch trial. I think that Immortus is going to not only be the link between Loki and Wandavision, but create events that will lead us to the events of Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. Now, although Agatha, as far as I know, has never worked with Immortus in the comics, she was also technically never a villain, so clearly Marvel Studios is bending some things here and there. Couple this with the fact that Kevin Feige has already confirmed that Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness and WandaVision are directly related to one another. It all makes sense. Also, the introduction of Immortus would explain the infamous boner joke. Being a reality traveler, Immortus could have easily just brought another Pietro from another reality, or in this instance, Peter, into the MCU for Agatha to manipulate and enchant. So that way they can get closer to Wanda and get closer to finding out how she was able to revive Vision. This would explain how the fake Pietro would have the exact same powers as the real Pietro in the MCU. Also, it's worth mentioning that not only does Kang know about Immortus, he hates him with a burning passion, even though they are the exact same person. Yes, I know it gets really confusing, but it's because of this that Kang would be the perfect big bad for Marvel. He'd be the perfect replacement for Thanos. He would have different versions of him running around, causing so many different events and chaos. It would be amazing to see. Because you could have him as the main villain in a movie like Ant-Man Quantumanium, but still have his presence prevalent, even if he's defeated. Also, I want to mention that Immortus is the one who decides what realities to prune in order to keep the Timekeeper safe. So his introduction in Loki would make sense, as he would have direct contact with Judge Renslayer, aka the woman who he loves. As always, this is just my own speculation. However, I do feel strongly about this theory. I think it's correct. I have never felt so strongly about a theory before. But as I always say, no matter how much you love a theory, no matter how much you want it to be true, there's always a really big possibility that it's not. So take everything I say with a grain of salt. I hope you enjoyed this theory. If you did, please leave a like so I know to keep on making these theory videos. As previously stated, I am posting bi-weekly every other Monday, so be sure to subscribe so you never miss a new MCU theory. As always, I'm AJP Nerd Freak, and I'll see you later, Nerd Freaks.